Hello and welcome. I'm joined today by Paul Conway. He's the CEO of Yuno. Hello, Paul.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. So, Paul, we spoke off camera about a very sexy topic, compliance. So, Paul, I guess the proposition for agents when we're talking about compliance is that we read a lot in the headlines recently about clampdowns on compliance and the area of particularly property management is becoming very much an administrative burden for most managing agents, keeping on top of that compliance, something which we never used to have as an industry previously, but we're seeing more and more compliance officers cropping up in different offices. You've got dedicated people taking care of one particular area. And I suppose the reason why this area is so important is if you don't comply, the outcomes can be very detrimental for either the landlords that you represent and or the actual agents themselves. But luckily, there's somebody that can help with that, right?
Yeah, hopefully, and we can make it a little bit more fun than the word compliance. But yeah, essentially, where we are focusing in is around market changes and what most affects our clients. And at the moment in time, we're looking at licensing and Article 4 planning permission, and that is because it's an absolute mess. And as you say, that comes down to not only identifying that problem, but who in the company is taking care of that? What's the overarching systematic view of it? And how can you not only, when you know at the top of the tree, whether you are, a Hamptons of the world or a smaller agent, how you understand what that problem is, then also train your team and your staff, your branch managers, your property managers, so that they can confidently explain to your landlords and all the, obviously that whole risk level around that, training, understanding. Like if you put your team on training courses, they'll remember 25% of it if they're paying attention. And then you then have to get that to the landlord. And you obviously want a happy client. So you want them to really understand it and feel that they're in safe hands. So you've got all that kind of piece that's really, really important. That's obviously, how do you identify the problem? How do you train your team? And how do you in turn train your landlord? And then how can you make that problem a little bit more, how then do you also answer those initial questions of like, I'll go into some kind of why these market changes happen and what they actually change within the local markets. But essentially then, like, what is it the landlord is going to say? It's like, oh, I'm going to sell my property, I'll just hold out for a family. Yeah. All these bits and bobs, and how do you deal with those questions? How do you deal with those concerns confidently, as well as understanding the boring stuff? How do you understand that? Yeah.
Because we as say lettings agents, we understand the legislation's coming out, we know what dates that it's coming in, and we understand what the penalties or the consequences are of not following that. We can contact our landlord database and we can say, right, pal, from the beginning of July, new law states that you have to have a new standard of electrical test. We're going to do all of this sort of stuff for you. And by the way, the cost will be X, Y, Z, and then you're going to end up paying on top of that. And for a landlord, that is just a huge yet another kind of legislative slap in the face, telling him how much money he's not going to be earning. But what we're not sometimes doing as agents, and we all are guilty of this, is not educating those landlords enough so that they feel they're part of that decision, rather than us saying, listen, Mr. Landlord, this is what you're going to have to do, and this is how much it's going to cost you. You actually start a process of communication with that landlord, educating them as to what the basis for the legislation change is, what it aims to achieve, why it's particularly pertinent to them. How does it, in certain areas, you've got licensing, so licensing will affect only certain landlords, why they will need to go through that process. And I think helping people to make that leap between the actual reality and also that educational background that needs to go with it is key to agents being able to do it harmoniously with their clients.
Yeah, and it's the difficult part. If you imagine like levels of complexity, it's like how difficult was it to train the whole market on what an electrical report was, who should do it, and when it should be done. Like that was ridiculous. Now multiply that complexity by 1,000, because you've got multiple different kinds of certification, multiple complexity around where it actually applies, how it applies, and obviously then you've got all that advice and understanding. So you've got all that training and understanding for yourself, your team, your landlords, and yeah, they've got to feel comfortable. But essentially, going back to your point on like costs and things like that, it's very important to understand that it might be the right decision not to go through planning permission or not go through a license. And I mentioned planning permission because you could have two sisters and a friend living together in some boroughs and they need planning permission for that. It's crazy. And again, location problems. But it's not about that problem. It's not about just identifying that problem, confidently explaining the problem, but it's also understanding it's like what that actually means for the landlord when it comes down to cold hard cash for you and your landlord. How do you make that beneficial? If I would say, of course, there is, like, some agents collect commissions and there's money to be made out of problems, of course there is, and that's really important, and that's what we do focus on, and making sure that is not. You can make money out of problems, but if you've taken 10 hours to solve that problem, did you make any money? So effectively, if you've systemized it and automated it in such a way as what we've achieved, essentially that's really important. But also, as I was talking about these changes in markets, we've been in so many different markets, but I'm talking different councils, when things change, and it's changed by street or ward or council, by size of property, by amount of occupants. And as you go back to that, I'm waiting for a family. Do you know how many people in Westminster are going to say that? Right, because
they're waiting for that one family.
Because obviously we're discussing a little bit about the new legislation that's coming in. So what happens is that the value of family homes or one or two people sharing drastically goes down, and sharers cost properties for rental yields on sharers goes up. And these are the market changes we're monitoring. Why it's very important. It's not about that identifying that compliance problem as we're talking about, and then you've got the training, but also how you advising their landlords based on that. Because yes, they will have to spend a few grand. But how can you easily calculate it going, you're going to have to spend a few grand, but I know I can get sharers in this for, £400 more a month. And by next month, that'll be a completely different figure, because of the fact that everybody's holding out for families and they're getting void periods and all the rest of the stuff. So it's about that piece as well, that advice piece on the investment.
Because you also end up in dealing with this and not just going for the sort of easiest solution, saying, okay, well, I'm going to wait for the right kind of tenant to come along. You're actually unlocking a whole portion of the market that previously these landlords were perhaps ruling out, or were going to have to rule out.
Yeah, they're basically saying, ignoring two sisters and a friend living together, like that, and especially in areas of. The interesting thing is that it's because these legislations come in where there's more population density, and in more areas of more population, you're more likely to have sharers. So essentially, when we talk about this specific problem, the reality of the market fluctuations are symbiotic between every single market. It does the same thing. So it's kind of crazy.
So compliance, I think we all agree, is something that you can't really leave to chance anymore. It was something that horrifically agents always used to kind of go, don't worry, we'll basically be okay and we'll get through it. But as we see increasingly, the local councils and the local sort of boroughs are all clamping down on particular hotspots. And obviously there's been a bit of a push through the press to try and sort of even certain standards of housing. That's why this legislation is being changed. And also to get on control of the number of properties that are HMOs or that have been divided up, and to make sure that they're providing a basic standard of accommodation. And previously, there's never really been a way to monitor all of that, because let's face it, the data was hard to scratch together.
Yeah.
But the data science behind what you guys do, you're harnessing all of that local data, aren't you? And you can break it down per area.
Yeah, essentially, it's just from a user's perspective, from a partner's perspective. It's like if you're connected by a CRM or whatever, or you put in the address manually into the system. I'll explain the differences, but essentially, you don't need to know anything. like apart from where your property is and how you plan to run it. And that becomes really important from a branch manager perspective. So like a lot of our partners use this from a monitoring perspective. Like, so if something changes, tell me that something's changed, or based on the changes we've into our system, got a new tenancy, there's a new change. Now from a branch manager, that's the PM side. From a branch manager perspective, how are you having that conversation right before you decide to move somebody in? Right, I'm going to put 3 people in, this is how they're related, or it sounds they're all related, that's great, but we don't need to worry about this. Bear in mind that from a licensing perspective, it could be in some areas families or 1 or 2 people need something called selective license, and then there's even converted buildings. So you know, converted buildings of some kind, the whole building, the freeholder needs a license on it, as well as some of the flats could need licensing based on other rules. So yeah, it's a bit of a mess. So like essentially, yeah, that is what we've done, is collect all that data, and you don't need to worry about that. All you need to do is, as long as your information is in the system, we'll tell you. And what we're also building out is that looking at change. So not only changes that you make, but what the local markets are changing as well, and how that advice changes. So that's
and you guys use the this is going to become a buzzword, but you use the unique property reference number, don't you? So yeah. Every property in England now has its own identifier, and so you know which one we're talking about when we inquire about it.
Yeah, really looking forward to CRMs. They are moving that way, and that would be fantastic. The unique identifier is what we use. So yeah, hopefully if people have the UPRN, it's just super easy, gets super accurate first time. Yeah, and we're all talking about the same property rather than flat 2F, flat B, this, you know, upper floor flat left hand side to the back with the blue door. That's essentially the current system is that. The new system is some numbers attached to an exact property address. So yeah, that's fantastic. Works brilliantly from a tech perspective.
So let's say I'm an agent that is I'm a little bit behind on my compliance and I want to catch up. And I'm losing some sleep at night wondering how on earth I'm going to do that. How quickly can I get onto Yuno's system? How quickly can I begin using it? And in actual fact, how quickly am I going to be able to get sorted?
So yeah, it depends on you know, your size and what we're connected with and stuff like that. But like, you can use the Yuno system like that within minutes of, you just put the address in and it'll tell you the answer. You can also upload by CSV, so you can download your properties and upload it into the system, and it'll sit and monitor them for you. And then we also have API connections with CRM. So we're moving towards some Repit and all various other ones as well. So yeah, it's pretty easy.
You play well with others. That's good. Always good to hear. So agents use this for property management. Landlords can use this to get on top of their own compliance. But there's also applications within the sales side of our industry as well, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, like for all of this, it's like, okay, it kind of comes down to, from a data point of view and the compliance point of view, sorted, all done there. Now, where we are looking at it again is from an investment point of view. So it's like, what is the right decision to make? So essentially that comes down into, well, there's 2 areas that sales are important. So one is like, am I going to invest in this property?
Yeah.
So a little bit of sales pricing and this information in the journey that we've created on the app really helps with that problem, you know. And then also the other point with sales stuff as well is, and then we've got brokers, mortgage brokers that are key to us as well. Because if you don't have the right information at the start, the mortgage product will be wrong or the sale's going to fall through. Yeah. Like both of those things, if you understand this at the start, then you're either the investor does or the agent or broker looking after that investor, you'll pick the right property, pick the right product, you'll sell the right property in the right way, you'll give all the information, there's less chance of it falling through, which is fantastic. And there's also other parts of the exciting legislation that means that even if you're buying a flat in a converted building and you're going to be an owner occupier, the mortgage company might not even lend on that based on
it's about making those key facts available to buyers so that they can make informed decisions. And moreover, what we're seeing is a shift within the industry that if you're not making those material facts available to the buyers, you cannot just say, well, I didn't know about it and therefore that's why we didn't provide that information. as an agent, you now need to make a concerted effort to really ask your clients what the deal is with their property. But if they don't know, and a lot of clients will say, look, I bought this 20 years ago, I haven't got a clue. It's been managed by somebody else. If you can't handle it, let me know. And then at that point, you then can look into it, and you can type the address into here, and you can find out exactly what the live issues are that you're dealing with.
Exactly. Yeah. And that, as you say, it's so important in it, but it not only it helps in a lot of ways, like, and not just in the specific problems that we solve, and that's why we're adding other things into our system as well. Because at the end of the day, as you say, it's about not making it fall through. You can push forward and you can do your sales, and we're there and we're just about to sell it, but then the mortgage product was wrong, or the client didn't have enough information, or something changes, and you've just wasted all of that time, and it has to go back in the market, and you do the whole process.
I mean, sales can fall through for something as stupid as a buyer assuming that the property was leasehold when in fact it was freehold, or vice versa. That mortgage offer is going to have to be re-looked at again. It may even have to be reissued. That can take time, and if time's of the essence, as everybody last month was trying to get everything through by the 30th. I know of more than one where people went, oh, hang on, we've applied for the wrong product by mistake. So all of us can help each other cut out these kind of silly errors, if you like, that don't add value to anybody other than it delivers them time, and it really saves, it can save a sale. It can be the difference between a sale going through and not. You guys have got some fantastic training on. Next week, well, today we're talking about the 20th of July is your first session, and then I think you've got a second session after that. The 20th of July session concentrates more on the changes in Westminster, and how that is now affecting agents. It's free for people to log in and take part.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's free to come along. I guess it comes down to awareness and what we're trying to help with the market. So, like, free to come along, and just come along. And at the end of the day, it's Westminster. It touches on Westminster, but 95% of it is about the whole country, and it explains absolutely everything, and how not only how to solve the problem, ask the right questions and understand it, but also how you're having that conversation with your landlord and your team, and how you're better educating everybody and helping them make better decisions. That's the whole point. Yeah, and then we've got the general one, which is a couple of days later, so I'll send you both links, and you can.
There will be a link to this, as well as to the latest Yuno deal on Kerfuffle that will be splashing across the screen as we speak right now, but also there'll be a link to both of these training days. They are free. They're an absolute must-have for any agent that's involved with the management of property. Even if you think you've got on top of your compliance and you just want to hear how perhaps somebody else is doing it, or you want a window into a different kind of solution, I'd encourage you to engage with this, because, as I say, it's there, it's free, nobody's trying to sell to you, it's information, and these guys will help you with it.
Yeah, and I think that's it only takes an hour of our time, and everybody that wants to come on and log in, doesn't cost as much. So, and if people are getting value out of it, then that's great. So yeah, really happy.
Well, I'll be logging in. You need at least one heckler, right? I'm going to be there. Hey, it's me. But Paul, that's a great introduction to what Yuno do and what you're helping agents to tackle at the moment. And we'll check in with you from time to time and just see, because the legislative landscape is ever changing, particularly in the property management world. But in general, I think as they introduce ROPA and other bits of minimum standards in our industry, compliance is going to become a buzzword. And I think we'll come away from thinking that it's something that bogs us down and is not worth engaging with, but in actual fact, probably picks up the standard of the work that we're doing.
Yeah, and it is the boring part, but again, it's like how we're looking at it as well as around, well, what effect does that have? What effect does it have on your business? How as our business as agents? How does it affect our team? How does it affect our landlords? How does it affect our bottom line if we don't get it right first time? And that ultimately is the reason why like why we're talking, why we're thinking of it like that, because that's the important part, as well as like obviously making sure the properties are safe and the tenants are safe and everything else. Like essentially, unless the landlords have a good investment and have been given the right advice at the right time, the last part is never going to happen, because they won't have enough money, or they've bought the wrong investment, or they're doing the wrong things, or they've made the wrong decisions. So that's hopefully what we can help with. Yeah, and the biggest thing, so we have 3 value adds, you'll see it on our website. So generate revenue, save time, and de-risk. Yeah. We've got them in that order because that's what they want to do. So they've got a whole new batch of problems that are causing them risk, that's going to cost them time, and it's probably going to cost them money, but they might make something out of it. But if you use Yuno, you can change it all in your head, where you just like, I'm making lots of revenue with spending a little bit of time, and they don't have any risk. Fantastic news. So that's how we put it across to agents.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
No problem. Thanks.